like to invite the panelists, so the people wiser than myself, to tell you about green transition. So I'd like to ask Beata Lubos, Director of the International Cooperation Department, Łukasiewicz Institute of Aviation. And we're back. Stanisław Szultek, Director of the Economic Development Department at Pomorskie Voivodeship Marshal's Office, our host. Mr. Marek Szczepański, Director of Environmental Programs at Bank Ochrony Środowiska, Bank of Environmental Protection. So there'll be something about finance. I'm happy about that. And Mr. Piotr Śladowski, President at ARPE Vehicles. I'd like to use the phone. I apologize for using the phone, but I'll just time myself with the timer here. This is going to be an interesting panel. We've been talking quite a lot about green transition, and we've been preparing for this. I'm talking about the world of science and businesses, agencies, local self-governments. We all are going to try to reduce environmental impact. We're going to be looking at various low emissions technologies, decarbonization, green investment. So there are a lot of challenges ahead of us, but today we're going to focus on how we can make money directly on carrying out these activities and about the opportunities and costs. This is the subject we're going to discuss with the panelists. I'll just start by saying that green transition should not be perceived as cost only, but as an opportunity for gaining profit. The Global Renewable Economy report is indicating that, and the green technologies are key as a response to climate change, but they can also be profitable. So, according to experts, by 2050, the economy can gain, world economy can gain more than $10 billion from developing RESs. We have such a broad panel of experts that can probably take on this subject. And the first question, I'm looking here at Director Szultek. What can regions do? Let's start from the regional and local perspective. So how can the environment in which businesses and science are operating can affect the drive towards the green transition? Can regions support emission-less, self-sufficient industry and strategic investments? And what policies and activities and measures would reinforce this transformation in Poland? We don't have a lot of time. We have only 90 minutes, but I think there's enough. Well, yes. That was a very long and very complex question, and I could probably spend 90 minutes answering it. But let me start with a broader reflection, a broader concept relating to the title of our panels, how to make profit from a green economic transition. When I was getting ready today in the morning for this panel, I remembered an old Chinese saying, which I think fits the situation we're in very well. When the wind of history is blowing, some people build walls, others build windmills. So some people are trying to protect themselves from the changes, from what's ahead of us. Others are trying to take the opportunity and fit into that trend, and saying in a more mercantile manner, to make money on whatever is coming our way. So in order to have the opportunity to earn money from economic transition, first and foremost, we have to build windmills, both literally and metaphorically. So we shouldn't be afraid of it, especially because today, notwithstanding the discussion that what causes the climate change, temperatures are rising. We are at a stage where both business and public funds are not even considering whether it's a trend or it's a future trend. We know this is happening already. It has been happening for some time now, and we have no other way than to fit into this trend. So let me move on to what the local authorities could be doing and what they are doing. We define 3 conditions which are necessary in order to effectively take advantage of the green transition. And the first one is to define the priorities. Priorities that would respond to certain existing potential, but also the circumstances in which this entity, in which case, in our case, this is the region, the conditions that determine our functioning. And within these frameworks, we are defining certain needs and certain priorities. I'm not going to discuss it very broadly. I'll just give you a handful of examples. For instance, we're on the seaside. We're at the seaside, and we see some opportunity in developing offshore wind farms, which can then be transformed into future production of hydrogen and generally into renewable energy sources. In the context of renewable energy, we are in a region which is privileged in a way because of the trend of emphasizing green energy, because we do not have the burden of what we call, simplifying, the black energy generation. We don't have these transformation costs. We also don't have interest groups that would naturally want to influence those priorities that have to be taken into account. So for us, supporting the development of RES is a very straightforward solution towards our regional energy sufficiency. So this is a natural state of affairs and a natural priority for us as Pomerania. The second example is related to hydrogen. Since 2017, and this is actually, we have a representative of the business community here, so I'm taking away your subject. But the initiative of creating a hydrogen cluster and promoting the subject, remember how it started, Sławek Halbryt was the promoter of the idea. In the beginning, it was calling into the wilderness, without any response, but recently it accelerated very much, and the time invested back then is bringing results now. So this is no coincidence. First of all, there's initiative. There are clusters in place, but also we have access to the sea. We have natural caverns available where we could store hydrogen. We have some power infrastructure in the form of the former Lotos Group, which is a natural energy item. So these are all elements which provide us with a certain competitive advantage. But also we take initiative. Karolina Lipińska left just now, but she's responsible for the offshore trade show, which is educational as a general idea, and they're supposed to prepare talent for new green transformation. We'd be talking about stuff and people in the future. Yes, but I'm emphasizing this in terms of priorities. The second issue is partnership, and I already mentioned this a little bit. As the local self-government, now we can define certain things. In some areas we have more competence than others, for instance, rail transport. We also invest, the regional local self-government invested in the development of a new municipal rail line before green transition became a thing. But from the point of view of emissions reduction, access to railway lines is one of the most important investment projects to reduce carbon footprint. But the partnership with business, partnership with education, with hydrogen clusters and other agencies and entities. But I'm talking about it because if you have defined the priorities, in order for this to start working, you can't do a lot of things alone. What you need to achieve a certain commonality of thinking. In order to illustrate what I have in mind, I'll use hydrogen as an example. Today, hydrogen or challenge for making hydrogen available. The question is, do we first provide infrastructure charging station, or do we first to have demand? In truth, it has to match and happen at the same time. So it's not the sort of project that can be done in half a month, 3 months, half a year, or 1 year. It's longer. In order for this to come together at the same time, you have to have a lot of partners talking together. Business, local authorities, local self-government, and a number of other agencies and partners in order to have a realistic plan of when are we going to be ready to start up. There's a report now being prepared, Scenarios for Development of Hydrogen Technologies in Pomeranian Voivodeship, Pomeranian province, which is going to be a basis for discussion of our strategy. And the third thing I want to say in the context of clusters, because we're talking about clusters, in order for all this to be translated into action, those priorities and the partners for all these things to be converted into real action, we also need a certain institutional capacity. Institutional capacity to deliver the subjects that we've defined. And again, we're really talking here about internal capacity of the various organizations, local self-government and businesses. But it's not the local self-government that's going to be delivering those projects, which, by the way, doesn't mean that they're not partner in all of them. But in the context of clusters, we are treating partners from energy industry, from sea-related industries or ICT. We're treating them as partners that help us define priorities for the region. And some years back, we've had regions and intelligence specializations in the region that were created as a grassroots problem. So this is a natural cultural environment for us. So we now want to reinforce the institutional and organizational potential to be reinforced so that clusters become partners for us, even new clusters that are now being formed, those that are starter clusters or even interest groups. This was really the reason why the hydrogen cluster was formed. It started from an interest group. So we want to provide seed money for various initiatives so that they can demonstrate, we agree what we want to see done in a year's time. This is the time where a subject can be really verified. Cybersecurity, health, autonomous vehicles, but again, also energy generation. And this is what we want to do. And finally, I'd like to say, to emphasize why institutional capacity is so important for us. Last year, we prepared a competition for hydrogen valleys in Eastern Central Europe. There were money available. There were funds available. So we wanted to build a partnership. You were supposed to create a partnership of a certain number of entities. We were quite advanced, but eventually we failed to complete this, usually caused by small things, a little short of time. We were a little short of mutual trust that wasn't sufficiently developed in the community. And to a certain extent, we were short of people who had the operational ability to deliver. So emphasizing this, priorities, partnerships, institutional capacity. These are the conditions in order to effectively play, not guarantee, but the necessary conditions to start being effective in play. Thank you very much. You also mentioned the risk factors. We will probably go back to this because we have to realize that the visionary approach that you mentioned and the preparation that Pomerania is demonstrating for the new aspects, low emissions, hydrogen, all this brings certain risks. But as you said, we also don't have enough people. But in order to talk about competencies, I'd like to revisit that subject later, because competencies can either accelerate or delay green transition. As we all know, in businesses, in offices, it's really the human being which is the driving force for the activities, but also creating the right conditions is of key importance to achieve things. Now, Beata Lubos is with us. I'd like you to talk about those opportunities from your perspective, but first of all, about the trends in green economy, because the opportunities I'd like to discuss more broadly. Well, thank you very much. It's a subject for a lengthy dissertation. Yes, our 90 minutes is already 15 minutes shorter. Yeah, I'd like to sum it up, even though in this company, I'll probably be bringing wood into the forest. At least looking at Madam Moderator, I'll be briefing you from a cluster's core business. My role is of a moderator. That's why I'm asking you for things I know. I understand. Let me approach this question in a dual way. First, summing up the trends for you in the audience. We see that in the development of green transition, the business models related to sustainable development is absolute number one. And the ability for businesses to think in those terms and to change their mindsets, to start perceiving it as an opportunity and not just a threat. Opportunity that has to be seized. Failure to seize that opportunity is a possible threat for the future. For many years, we've been saying that this is a train you have to hop on, absolutely, because afterwards there'll be nothing coming to the station. If you're not on the train in time, you'll have to liquidate your business. If we don't look as a business at green transition as your development opportunity. So this is one very solid bullet point and a very important trend that you can't bypass. You have to be involved. Renewable energy sources, this is the second source. Using renewable energy also by individual consumers and businesses, attempts to cope with the energy crisis, the rocketing energy prices. Innovation is sometimes enforced on us by circumstances. So sometimes bad situations in the market actually accelerate transition towards in the green direction. There is an anti-trend in the context of energy prices, but electromobility is a really strong and powerful trend that is going to continue developing. And at the moment, there's been a little bit of a hiccup in this industry, partially because of energy prices, but I don't think this trend will go. It had a temporary slowdown. We will have to think of how to mitigate problems and how to improve accessibility. I'm talking about prices here. And of course, the favorite subject for us all is circular economy. Everything that's happening also at the regulatory level, at the level of EU, where EU really is making a lot of these trends. We are observing increasing awareness for the importance of this trend among businesses and the academia. Something that should be discussed more often in a country which, in addition to quite strong industry, is also based on farming economically, is that there are a lot of trends related to green transition in food production and food consumptions. A very strong trend in this area is green transition, which became fashionable and an element of lifestyle, which is zero waste. Zero waste is now the top topic on Instagram and other social media. And at the end of the day, I think this is a very good starting point which will allow us to catch up with the leaders in the Nordic countries. They have this already in their DNA. This isn't something they have to learn. Another trend is the use of mainstream technologies, such as AI, digitization, blockchain, virtual reality or augmented reality, in order to develop new models that are going to contribute towards green transition. We do not really have to convince anyone in this room how much digital solutions are supporting the optimization of production processes and how they can effectively accelerate green transition. What makes us very happy, and I'm joining here, Mr. Director, the activity in the educational industry, and I'm smiling here at Director Karolina Lipińska, whose life mission has been to increase awareness in education about green transition in the offshore segment. This is a pilot activity which for all of us, which gives us all wings and is very inspiring for all of us. What Pomerania is doing offshore in education is something that absolutely should be multiplied and replicated wherever you want to pursue green transition. I'm not even talking about education of entrepreneurs and members of the academia, working with the children who in the future will think certain things are normal rather than being eco-friendly. This is something that we go for, so congratulations to all of you. As I say to Carolina, my face is always smiling when I hear about those activities. So what's trendy also is that there is a new market being formed for consulting services, for certification services. This is not just a fashion, but it's a necessity. You need to have those certificates. And this is a great role for clusters so that in their new concepts, where they provide services to companies to look at the mainstream provision, this is something that may allow entrepreneurs it can save the entrepreneurs at the time when suddenly the certificates will become a necessity, where you won't be able to enter any contracts in the EU without them. In the industry in which I'm involved right now, that is mobility, we also see the trends being real. We see the changes. We see how much the autonomization and digitization affect the future products for the mobility industry. It determines the products we use. A lot is being said also about sustainable urban planning and logistics, and this is of key importance for green transformation to be effected in cities. In the Institute of Aviation, we have a very hot topic called urban air mobility. We are talking about flying taxis, flying taxi cab, fully electrical system that both in cargo and in passenger transportations will be using the fact that 20 meters above ground, there are no traffic jams as yet, because I think soon there will be. And all these solutions, together with work on new fuels, sustainable fuels, where the development of which I believe more strongly rather than quick electrification or putting more electricity on hydrogen in aviation. I'll just insert something because bicycle paths are somewhere, perhaps will be in the air as well. Well, at that time, the vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. But if you think there will be a bicycle version of this, maybe you will be able to pedal on that vehicle. We have a good coworker does have pedaling stations, so you keep your blood circulating. This is a trend in transport, in aviation transport, autonomous aviation, which I think is going to make us red hot. It sounds like space age, but it's very, very close, really. Already at the Olympic Games in Paris, we are supposed to have such taxi cabs, and of course eco, because this will be fully electrified transport.
I'm just recollecting a couple of years ago when we for the first time saw a drone that was really surprising, and now they are so common and used in so many different areas. As this digitization and the directions you are talking about are interesting and developmental, and also clusters, open eyes and minds and our activities, and also need to consider financing. So that's the direction we should head for. And looking at the director, Mr. Szczepański, can you please tell us what kind of support is available, and all these initiatives, what can we expect in these areas? Thank you for having me, and I'm very sorry that I'm not wearing anything green, but our logo is green as Bank of Environmental Protection is a very little bank, but we first of all finance green and blue hydrogen-based initiatives, and we have been doing this for 30 years, and this results from our mission, and we are owned by the Agency of Environmental Protection and Water Management. So if we talk about the possible available finance sources, of course, I'm not going to talk about what the bank, in fact, is responsible for, as this can result from my nature. But I want to say that we have and we will have a lot of money, public funds and private and public connected funds. And also, Krzysztof mentioned the subsidies. And the projects for improving of energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Those of you who follow the market understand that we have had a significant change, radical change. The European Commission and other member states have a rule that if a project generates profit or savings by the rule, non-returnable funds should not be provided. It should be like preferential loan or a guarantee which can help to find a loan. This can be like subsidizing of interest rate or subsidies to equity, and I have been working on these funds for many years, and the great thing is to combine guarantees and subsidies. You can combine a loan with a subsidy. This approximates those returnable instruments to a subsidy. And one of the goals of the European Union policy is the so-called Green Europe. So this is the second goal. And I'm mentioning this as the European Commission and the Parliament also have the rule that a lot of funds for coherence policy is going to be spent on green and blue projects. So I can say that we are going to have a lot of money. And the money is going to be available in 3 or 4 locations. Firstly, as it was mentioned, the project called THANK. I'm not sure if you know that all those projects start with EP, like European funds. So we also have the Phoenix project. This is a project on environment, and we also have those regional projects. And also the National Redevelopment Program. I'm not going to discuss this, so I know that the new government is going to renegotiate the assumption to this program, and the ladies are nodding, so it means that you agree. Thanks seems to be quite interesting for the businesses. First of all, this is the environmental loan. Very shortly, this is a loan you can get from one of the banks cooperating with the Polish Development Bank, and this is a commercial loan, but if you meet some conditions, a significant share of this loan will be repaid by a subsidy. So that's not going to, so you can get a subsidy, but you will not get it in funds, but you can decrease your loan, and this money can be quite significant depending on where the investment will go, as of course those support need to go to be original support. And the first call was in the summer this year. Another call is going to take place by the end of the first quarter of the next year. And please look at this instrument, as you can use it to finance modernization of the manufacturing plants, replacing or exchanging of the old plants into new plants, which will, so I'm supporting a lot to this, as it has always been missing. And you can use these funds for replacing of the lighting, thermomodernization of the buildings. A large catalog of expenditures is available, and documents are known, so you can use websites to learn the conditions and get prepared for subsidies for the next call. And another instrument, which I believe is also quite interesting, probably financially not so much interesting, so these are loans with Ecomax guarantee. They are not so much attractive, probably, as they are faster. As environmental credits, the applications will be analyzed by the bank, but also will be analyzed by the commercial banks and the Polish Development Bank. But there's Ecomax loan. It will be only the decision of the bank where you will apply, and this will be collateral with non-returnable guarantee. So with this, you can get 20% of subsidy, which will be used to repay some shares of your loan, so you can repay your loans faster. And in the Q1 next year, those loans will be available. And let me also just mention two things. Regional programs, all of these regional programs will be, in all these programs, we will have some preferential loans or loans and subsidies connected for green projects, which will improve companies' energy efficiency, or you can use this money for developing of your renewable energy sources for your own needs, as generating of power from renewables. That's also a part of the Phoenix program, and this is where the calls have not been started. And my last sentence, this is not true that the funds are non-conditioned, unconditioned. So one of the very important conditions is to meet environmental conditions. You need to decrease energy consumption, primary energy consumption, and I will come back to this in the second round, where I hope you will be asking how we can help businesses. Yes, that's you are mind reader, as that's what we are going to discuss in next rounds. And this is really interesting, how you are outlining this green transition and to develop this platform for creating or discussing costs and threats. And I'm looking at Piotr Śladowski, and I'd like to ask you, what activities do we need to start to support innovative activities? And let me just add, as according to what Brussels says, by 2030, European Union, and 30% of technologies we are going to have is going to be green. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All revolutions or transitions, this is definitely an opportunity as well, first of all, opportunities. And we can also look at these opportunities from different perspectives. From the local government perspective, as Mr. Director said, a lot of money for electromobility from the European Union is going to be spent on that. As at least 4 billion euros in this perspective. This is money from EU, which is going to be spent to support electromobility. And as for the programs we know, at least 1,300 zero-emission buses, 1,350 zero-emission buses are going to be financed from the EU funds in Poland, municipal buses, city buses, and the same number of regional buses. So we are going to have like 3,000 buses, and this is going to be money for local governments, and the subsidies can be used for purchase of buses and coaches, as majority of programs, 50% of funds from a program can be used for purchase of buses and coaches, and the balance can finance banks of energy, PV, windmills, and other things of this kind. So this is a great opportunity for Polish local governments to renew the rolling stock and to develop the rolling stock. And in some counties, there is no public transport available. Moreover, we are going to support the local governments to participate, to at least a small extent, to participate in this green transitions. They can have their energy banks. They can also generate power for the needs of their local transport. This is something what we would like to encourage you to, as we are zero-emission vehicles manufacturer, like electrical vehicles or hydrogen vehicles. And from our perspective, the best model would be that the power generated locally by local government cities is used to power those buses, and power is used locally. That would be a true green transition, where we will be using green power. And this seems there seems to be a barrier. This would be good, but the question is how to encourage the local governments, how to convince the local governments. It's quite surprising for me, as if we look at some reports, we can see that there's so much money that the local governments are not applying for the money. So this is also a role of clusters, and you have a lot to do to educate local governments. This is so we have been also visiting local governments. We talk, and the local governments are quite surprised that, and they say, how is that possible that we can get 90% of a subsidy? Yes, that's true. Yes, you can get up to 90% or even more. So your own share is very little, and you can also use a loan from the National Funds of Environmental Protection. So in fact, you do not need to have your own funds, like if you are a local government, to be a part of local green transition. You only need to want to be a part of that. We have a lot of money available. We are going to have even more. We have EU guidelines saying that even this year we should have 10% of public transport based on zero-emission vehicles. In 2028, that's going to be 30%, and starting from 2030, no non-zero emission vehicles can be registered. So this transition is going to be very quick in public transport. So from the perspective of local governments, it is a great opportunity for additional money and to complete very nice investments in counties, in cities, in communes. So this is a local government's perspective. On the other hand, we also have this business perspective, small businesses and bigger businesses perspective. So together with this green transition, we are also going to develop some new industries, industries which have not been there. As Pomeranian region is also a good example here, as those Słupsk, city of Słupsk, which is still located in the Pomeranian region. There is a manufacturing plant of cylinders, so the new businesses can be developed, so which can provide some products or services. So new industries can be developed as a part of the green transition. As my colleague was saying, there's infrastructure. We need to have a lot of money to invest in power generation and hydrogen infrastructure. So all service providers in these areas, also some components manufacturers, they can find a lot of opportunities. The Polish industry can find a lot of opportunities. And also Worthington in Słupsk, in Zielona Góra, we also have Ekoenergetyka, a large corporation manufacturing chargers. And they have only recently won a major tender for supply of a couple of thousand of chargers for the city of Paris. They also have some experiences with Berlin. So this is a great opportunity to offer new products like hydrogen cylinders or chargers, electric chargers. So that's also great opportunities for businesses, and you can use what is happening to start existing in the market. Also for software developing companies, it is all needed for some settlement systems. So that's a great direction. And the dialogue and discussion on different sectors of supply chain on different levels and different planes to know what the needs are, what the potential is, what the possibilities are available to be active in green transition and hydrogen. That's what has been also mentioned. Żaneta Kłostowska, the manager of hydrogen technology cluster, that's a great area for some more discussion and to indicate the directions which are possible as a hydrogen. It is something what we have been talking very broadly nationwide, and some people may have some threats or they may be missing some knowledge on how things can be used. And so my point is here that probably we need to identify SMEs, how they can be involved in this business transition, in economy transition, in those directions you have been responsible for. Thank you very much for inviting me. And let me start by mentioning what SMEs know about energy transition. From the latest studies in the Pomeranian province, in 350 businesses, we identified that 12% of businesses have totally no idea of what green transition is, and they believe that this is something what they are away from. So the first element is the dialogue and education, and that's and also thank you to Karolina. As we have been educating the youngest generations, we need to invite Karolina here, probably. As in fact, youngest people entering the labor market, they also need to have knowledge to understand and be aware of how we can affect stoppages, how can we stop climate changes, how can we change the market, and how can we make non-financial reporting, and how can we affect those environmental parameters. If we talk about SMEs and micro companies, we also need to talk about the time horizon whenever we speak about the transition. And the non-financial reporting as involvement of small companies to the value chain, not only based on the hydrogen, will require them to undertake some activities. These do not have to be ad hoc activities. They do not have to totally change how they power their facilities. As for smaller businesses, some smaller factories, some of them can have a very big energy consumption, but we are talking about small steps, and this will help them to demonstrate to their counterparties how they operate, how they change, and this can prove them that they decarbonize. And as for the hydrogen value chain and developing of the hydrogen economy in the Pomeranian region and the nationwide, the cluster of hydrogen technologies involves SMEs and also bigger companies. We develop the value chain as we need some small suppliers, we need service providers, we need some IT solutions and also consulting solutions. We have been cooperating with the local government, we have been cooperating with R&D sector, and we developed a community which will create some new possibilities for all the businesses and all those who are interested in developing of the hydrogen economy in the Pomeranian region. And the recent step we have taken and which we are going to present here, it is the schedule and assumptions of our actions, and that's what we are going to discuss on the on the Pomeranian offshore platform that's going to take place on the 1st of December. And we will also discuss the assumption of the offshore to hydrogen platform. As we are a center, a hub of green energy, we have very good conditions. I mean, the coastline, we have a very good wind conditions. We also have the offshore farms, and of course can use the natural hydrogen stores. So I'm talking about caverns, so the natural storage facilities. We have also the Gdańsk Bay, which has a lot of water, which can be used in the future for electrolysis. As we are not going to use fresh water, we are going to use sea water for that, and we have a very good possibilities to use. And our businesses, those who are aware of that and who want to go forward of expectations and they want to be in this stream of green transition, they have been using those elements, and we are in the dialogue. We know them and we support them in these aspects. Together to be able to start to trigger hydrogen economy, to connect it with other renewables. This is of key role, as hydrogen is not going to operate without offshore and without other renewables. And that's, I think, there's nothing more to say, as these are things which are clear for our businesses. As a cluster, we have been supporting not only our businesses, but we also have been supporting businesses which are not our members. They also approach us with some questions. So we are open to the dialogue, and we want to be involved, and we want to share and make Pomerania more green. I'm really happy if we look forward, and I'm representing a cluster responsible for recycling, and I'm really interested to hear what is going to happen, what is going to be developed, and then we need to think how things will be recycled or how things will be reused. So our industry need to get used to that. So we always need to look forward. As Madam Lubos mentioned, we also need to look at closing the loop and further steps. But I'm not an expert here, but a moderator rather. But I'm also willingly listening to Piotr Śladowski. Now moving on to some specific tangible things, and we want to talk about the tangible things, how not to waste the opportunities of green transition.
How not to waste? Well, that will be difficult. As we know, green transition is going to take place. The question is, will all of us hop on that train? Yeah, we are hopping on that train. We're on it? Yes. There is no other way. We just have to utilize the opportunities which are coming our way. The EU funds which are made available for these projects, and indeed there is going to be quite a lot of it. Quite certainly we're looking at these changes from the perspective of our eyes as they are located today. We probably have to try and look at these problems more broadly. What comes to my mind is a handful of anecdotes that we were talking about before, the stories that the world knows already. Like, for instance, the fact that the head of the patent office in New York in the year 1900 made a motion to the Congress to close that institution because he believed that everything had been invented. These are facts. It happened. So please see, ladies and gentlemen, that another humorous event are Paris architects, who are also considering that if Paris is going to develop at such a fast pace, where would all the horse stables go? Where would you fit them? So it turns out that certain problems solve themselves. So the green transition is also that sort of change, which is global in nature, which we are not fully able to grasp and imagine, because we are at the same time moving away from today's energy to distributed energy generation. For instance, when we talk about hydrogen and as the medium for transporting energy, because this is how we have to see it. Hydrogen, because of its properties, is most certainly not the type of substance that is dedicated for transport. So this very fact means that the power industry, distributed rather than concentrated, that we have a massive power station in the town of Bełchatów that's sending electricity to 1/3 of Poland. No, we're going to have a completely different industry in the future and completely different power industry. We have to look at the entire picture in an entirely new way. For quite some time, I've been dealing with logistics of fuels in Orlen, the Polish oil company. So when you say that hydrogen can be shipped, I could organize a separate conference about it. It would be very interesting. The first problem, is transporting LPG, propane, butane. They're difficult to transfer. If I were to create general Polish logistics for hydrogen, as I say, it's such a big subject. I would like a separate conference for this. So we have to look at this transformation much more broadly. We are ahead of us is something that we can't even imagine today. So from our viewpoint, an electrical vehicle versus internal combustion vehicle, very often drivers think it's the same thing because it has 4 wheels. So when we drive around in an internal combustion vehicle, we go into an EV, it should be driving the same way. Absolutely no. Completely different characteristics of the vehicle. It's really a computer on wheels, completely different systems inside. So we have to learn to use this new device from scratch. It's not a car in the same way that we've known cars until now. I'd like to encourage everybody to use and test those vehicles. I'm not going to go into much detail now because I would have to spend 3 years on describing the difference between EV and IEC. But I'd like you to taste this new thing, this new dish, which is electrical vehicle. That was very interesting, but I'd like to give the floor back to Mr. Director. Yeah, I wanted to say something because the very simple question that you asked is at the same time very important. But also, since we're all being sweet on another, when we talk about the potential, the opportunities, the advantages, which of course is true. But the question of how not to waste that opportunity, how not to let others win with us, is important. It's no coincidence that the subject of green transition is the first subject discussed at the Cluster Congress, because it's a fundamental change. The process which is going to start for the next decade, but perhaps longer, it will be defining the competitive advantage of various areas. It will create new winners and new losers. And of course, we're talking about opportunities and potentials. It's all available. It's for the taking. We talked about funding. There's a lot of it, although I always remember the words of a certain marshal who said, what's needed to win a war? Money, 3 things, money, money, and money. Money is important here. But one thing is that the money is available somewhere at EU level, at lower levels. Returnable will be more difficult. But I would not dismiss our ability to reach for it. When I talked about organizational capabilities, funding for clusters, because we're talking about clusters, also at EU levels and at national levels, there were lots of clusters. They're not always available. You can't always reach for them. When President Krystowski talked about a 10-person team in a cluster. But these clusters, there are not that many of those clusters in Poland that would have the institutional strength. We're not talking about 10 people, but you need to have a certain core team that would be highly stable, and it's the basis for pursuing your own agenda rather than the agenda which is available from a given source of funding. I'm talking about organizational capacity and capability and about building partnerships, also because today we are in a different place. And I mean us as local self-governments, NGOs, and businesses. We're at a different place of defining the policy for spending money, and in a different reality, social and economic reality, than we were 10 and 15 years ago. Then we were solving problems which West Europe and the Western world had solved before us. So we're obviously modeling their solutions and adjusting them and harmonizing with our environment and with our local specificity. Today, we're in a place where we're talking about problems for which West Europe does not have solutions yet. We have to invent, but first we have to learn to invent things which haven't been given. We have to learn to define the priorities and ensure capabilities of delivering the solutions, which is not obvious and not easy at all. And I'm also looking at green transition as an opportunity, because this is a new deal, the new deck of cards, also politically, also socially, because it will have far-reaching social consequences, as an opportunity that someone who's ready and determined can play above their current capabilities. The same goes for the economy. The economy can go out from being a subcontractor to being more innovative, but it's not anything that is given with a guarantee. We talk about the metaphor of hopping on the train. Are we on the train yet or not? The Western world, I don't want to use a bad word, but is already going at a high speed inside that train. I wanted to use a stronger word there, but we have to be aware of that. And we have to very honestly name the situation and try to find answers. Unfortunately, I would say, a few years ago, it was a super opportunity to have a new game, to join a new game, where the pie has not been divided. But looking back from the perspective of those few years that have passed, the West is traveling at a faster pace than we are. I don't want to scare anyone. I'm really calling for all to pull themselves together and start working together, start defining how do we accelerate. The fact that Western world is accelerating, what can we say about Korea, China? Yeah, we're talking about the European Green Deal, but that is a poignant remark. We can easily catch up with the other part of Europe that is ahead of us, but it requires a stable regulatory environment that will allow investors to enter, put in money in transformation, and then we can really catch up with the leaders of transformation. When we talk about offshore wind energy industry, the UK has a fantastic sets of regulations. We could actually cut and paste their legislative solutions and just get ahead with the investment projects. This will also build a certain awareness of stability for investors from outside of Poland who would like to enter our market. Yeah, liquidating investment barriers is really the key issue. Let's start talking about barriers. We are all being sweet on the situation, as Mr. Director noted, so let's talk difficulties. When we talk about hydrogen market, we do not have legislation as of now. In Spain and Portugal, there are already hydrogen filling stations. They are publicly available. We are in the same EU, and it's really difficult to get a permit or achieve a certification, have a takeover done, because we do not have internal legal regulations. We should really learn and use and be open to those countries and those bodies that have solved that problem, that have dealt with it. They have the solution in place. You can go there, touch it, see it. I know that copying one-to-one is not always successful. I don't know in your industries, but there are cultural and social conditions that are maybe different, also legislative, and they mean that in our industry, waste management, the investment projects are delayed by 5 to 7 years. So I'm looking at new technologies that are being developed. We have the first lithium-ion batteries recycling plant, and how can we catch up with West Europe when we talk about all other activities in waste management that are. Director Beata Lubos, let's discuss the barriers and opportunities. Maybe we have enough time. I would like to go back a little bit to the previous question. We talked about costs and challenges. From the perspective of a research agency that works in the aviation industry, the things that Director Schultka talked about, the fast acceleration in the West, there is a challenge where certain barriers just liquidate themselves. When we work for aviation, it's impossible for you to work on development activities for the local market, domestic market. It just doesn't make any sense. We naturally work for the global clients. And the major challenge in the context of green transition is that our mindset and our ideas for R&D have to absolutely match the expectation of global manufacturers. And this is really the biggest challenge, because straight away we are at the head of the race, whether we want it or not. First of all, we have to be there in the front, not be hiding in the corner, but show ourselves. And with our experiences, which probably be mentioned in the following panels, what really worked was participating in European partnerships, such as in aviation and other related to mobility, like connected automatic driving or shared transport. These are exclusive clubs which represent, together with the global companies, which define the directions for digital and green transition and transformation, because these are the most important in the world in these industries. So from the technical side, working with these teams, sitting at the same table with Airbus, for instance, it gives us, as a Polish research institute, a tremendous knowledge about how to catch up with the leaders in that race and how we can develop these technologies. For us, realistically, the barrier in green transition is the issue of safety. So balancing out the trends related to green transition with the requirement for aviation traffic safety or mobility safety. What we wanted is to have very light designs, but the discussions of what happens with a lightweight design when there's a storm and there's thunder and lightning is a completely different subject. So some of our designers would prefer to be sitting in an old design aircraft rather than the new lightweight machine. So this is a massive technological challenge, which is really slowing down the green transition in this sector. Now, when we talk about barriers, then I'm coming back to the second question. even though it's a little embarrassing for me to speak from this point of view about the barriers for green transition, but I'll try. I believe that there's a lot of work to be done on the part of legislation. There is a tremendous strength in regulation and standardization. There's power. We not only have to consider what needs to be done, even though all entrepreneurs that face the challenge of green transition are also facing the issue of waste recycling. Walking up in the middle of the night, they will recite all the doubts about the current legislation. And I think that is a voice that is well and loudly heard. There's a lot of work that needs to be done about waste management legislation to extend the responsibility of manufacturers so that companies feel that they have an impact on the system and that money is used as effectively as possible. And in the public debate, this is something that's been discussed for a long time now. A lot is also to be done in terms of RES and the development of legislation about renewables. In terms of spatial planning and in the context of modern cities. But it's not just know what, but it's also know how. I would say that there is a very strong challenge in co-creation of new legislation together with the end users. And I'll put a full stop at that. Maybe for that transition, which is a tremendous challenge for the entire economy, to be carried out in an atmosphere of mutual understanding. And this is something I would be very keen to see. But also, this is a list of wishes, but if I can go ahead and mention them, I would really wish for myself and for the lawmakers that they create solutions that do not hinder innovation and do not hinder new initiatives. In that context, however my colleagues from RCLs are going to call it, a blank regulation, a regulation that leaves space for interpretation is the one that creates space for new solutions. The concept of legislative sandbox is something that I'm a fan of. There are many sectors that are highly regulated, such as transport, energy, health, most of the areas in which national key clusters are operating in Poland, but generally cluster initiatives. The creation of regulations that give innovators a certain immunity from the law, that give a certain permission for experiment under a watchful eye of the regulator, are solutions that are implemented in many countries, and we could successfully use it in the context of green technology and green transition. In the context of the second leg, which can be hindered by certain solutions, which is financing. There's a tremendously large number of opportunities, but there are also challenges with going from grant system in terms of funding to loan system, so repayable funding. The main challenge for large, wealthy regions is going to be the issues of public support. I'm talking about this from the point of view of Warsaw, where zero funding, zero support hurts a little. And naturally, green transition in the wealthy regions, which are privileged in a way, but it's good to be privileged. It's going to support development. But developmental lag is more difficult.
Let me make a reference to this innovative approach to legislation. First of all, I can agree that legislation, lawmaking, this is a very important thing, and this is a condition for making some solutions more broad. But we need to be aware that if the regulations are here, and if we base on the implementation, or if we also use legislation from other countries, it means that they made more steps forward, and if some things are regulated, so we also limit the space for experimenting and doing new things. Of course, it does not make the regulation less important, particularly these blanket provisions, if we talk about the transport or with also railway, which is important for me from a perspective of the local government. But I wanted to say that it is not enough. If we want to get more, if we want to make some, if we want to, our businesses make a good position, become more well-positioned, and if they want to be in a good position, so we should not be afraid of experimenting, probably going forward against those formal regulations. There are some methods to do that, but for this we need to be determined and we need to be willing to do that. Also, we need some fund and we need to take this risk. As we need to invest money into something what is not very clear if it is going to bring some profits, if it is going to pay off or not. As if we know that the project is bankable, of course it is easy, but sometimes we have to invest more if before it is clear that the project is bankable, and this is how we can gather some experiences and become leaders. And in Poland, we are very weak in doing this, and in the context of repayable financing, as in Poland, we have a lot of those instruments. One of these, this is called energy islands. So this is not the generation of PVs or windmills, and this is more about combining of some new technologies and also storing, or to increase auto consumption level locally. So these activities can be subsidized. So we want to demonstrate that indeed we want to increase opportunities that people will invest in projects which can pay off or not, but this is how they can gather some experiences or become role models for others. And so these projects also for clusters should also be leaders, and they should go take steps forward, go forward, and the recycle cluster is a good example of taking this pathway. Thank you very much for mentioning that. This intersectoral approach is very important, and on interface of sectors, this is also where a lot of innovativeness takes place. And we, of course, not all of us know exactly how we should approach innovativeness. We also talk about closed loop economy, but some people say that if they do recycling, so they are the best in recycling. But this is another step. Marek Szczepański was mentioned, and he also want to comment on that. First of all, I'd like to talk about barriers and challenges. We have a lot of money, but this is not going to be enough for all of you. Secondly, I can agree that returnable funds are available, and businesses know how to use the preferential loans, as there are some instruments, how to combine loans and subsidies. The challenge is how quickly you can make how quickly we will be able to make those applications, as they are not going so much complex as for subsidies. You will have to just submit business plans, but you will have to confirm that you have complete some environmental ratios, like decreasing of energy consumption and some audits of energy consumption and some The market of energy audit is very shallow, and a lot of companies have not managed to complete those audits to apply for these environmental loans. And Bank of Environmental Protection is involved in this process, in the process of offering of Ecomax loans. But knowing that the challenge for businesses sometimes is they have to pay for preparing of energy audits and the technical documentation. So we have some EU money directly from Luxembourg, as we have grants from ELENA's Energy Local Systems programs. This is not a grant for us. This is a grant for you businesses, to finance 90% of energy audits or technical documentations, and this can be financed by us. We can do that, and we can finance your development of documents, and we want to acquire businesses, and together we can do, like I'm looking at Krzysztof. So I know you for a very long time, so I cannot believe that. But of course, we are very open. I'm talking in the name of my bank and my department. So if the need be, we can organize a meeting and tell you how you can finance things and how we can help businesses to prepare documents. Importantly, this is our innovation. We have not contracted one or two companies for energy audits. We have a short list of companies, and this list is open. And you are free to choose the business you want to work with. We will not require you to use one or two companies, and we can offer you a list of businesses developing energy audits, and you can freely choose the business you want to work with. And you can do this based on the cost they offering, and also the time is only a couple of years to finish up the perspective for 2021-2027. And before I finish up, as Beata is a very young person, but still she has been in the office for quite a long time. 20 years ago, we were working in the same ministry, and then I changed my work and my workplace, and I was working for an organization developing some EU projects. And once I received 100 documents to settle a very small project. So it is all recorded. So I need to use a very good language to say that how stupid it was to develop this kind of activity. That was very difficult to solve all those things. So we need to have also the reverse approach. And this is what we were talking at the very beginning. Stanisław Szutka mentioned the dialogue and the discussion. This is very important to know. And Beata was also mentioning this, as we need to know all the parties, and this is how we should do things. But I would like to add here as well that we are missing some data and some analysis to help us know what is needed, as in fact we are just tailoring the projects as we want, but generally these things can be combined and we can do the things together. And this is the role of clusters to promote symbiosis of clusters in industries. We have been talking about barriers, and we have been talking less about costs. We talk about costs, about activities, the risks, and that's what all the businesses and organizations need to accept. But before we finish, and I think it is of key importance, we have been talking about competences, qualifications, and people. And I'd like to ask you, before we finish this discussion, which can be a good start for the next debate, on competences, green competences of what probably we are missing. I'm looking at you, Director, and then I will ask each of you what you think about it. I have been talking about it a little bit. On the one hand, particularly we have been talking about the audits or offshore wind and education. This is happening, but we need to have knowledge if we talk about young people particularly, and we need to offer them qualifications. We need to offer these qualifications to qualifications which will be needed a couple of years from now. And we are aware that, to some extent, a challenge in the context of competences is that the present situation in the labor market is different, as we are missing people. We can see that we need to also use some immigrants, as we have shortage of labor force. So it is difficult to look for some reserves, and this is going to be a challenge. And indeed, I'd like also to emphasize a couple of examples. We have, once I was in the private sector, and I was applying for money, and now I'm on the opposite side. And I still do not understand all these things. Different departments have different approach, and it shows. We have been talking about available finance, that all these instruments are available, all these bricks are available, but if we manage to arrange them or not, it will depend on the competences, and they are different competences. So on the one hand, these are hard competences, technical competences, industrial competences, but more and more important are soft competences. We have been talking about partnership, about dialogue, about cooperation, as the clusters are some kind of emanation of this, and I can see here a lot of people. We have been talking a lot, but this is a challenge constantly, and also competences like international cooperation. Indeed, only recently we have had European Week of Regions, and we had a lot of people from different regions, and that's a great place. And so a lot of space for experimenting, for looking for cooperation. This is what clusters have been doing also. But to be efficient here, we need to have the minimum language competences. And secondly, you also need to have cultural competences to be able to cooperate or to learn how to cooperate. As this is important, as if you have people from different locations, if you listen to them, you can. So sometimes there are small nuances, but this is we need all these things, and also in reference to the director said, the different perspectives. I believe that not only because of the fact that I am one of the examples, but the mixing of people or going from one sector to another, like science, business. Krzysztof also is a good example, administration, politics. So this has to happen, as without this we will be lacking understanding. And in fact, if before you experience things, it is difficult to understand. You may have some knowledge, you may believe that you understand, but you need to experience things, and this will help you to understand what the problem in fact is. And I want to make it very clear that we are not only thinking about technical competences, so we need to think about the entire set of competences to be able to use all the options available. And I'm looking at the newest hydrogen achievements, and I'm looking at Żaneta and Mr. Śladowski, as new competences are important here. But do we need to train, educate people, young people, or can we change competences, requalify people doing jobs which are not needed anymore? Yeah, so this is what I wanted to say, that one element it is to train new employees and education from the vocational schools or secondary technical schools, as we need some technicians, some service people, some engineers to operate hydrogen plants. But in southern Poland, and using the example of the ex-mining industry, so this is where we have been requalifying people doing those jobs which are not needed anymore. So they are now becoming more experts in wind farms. And so this is the area where we need to invest in education. And also, we need to note that these competences should not flow away and go away, as we can educate our staff to bridge those competence gaps, but unfortunately local content can become global content, and we need to think of what we should do to keep our experts here locally, to help them develop our economy. Yes, some things are unavoidable, and Mr. President, and people and competences, this is something what makes things even more difficult. And I am a little bit stressed with what we have been doing and what we in fact have. But as my grandmother was saying, the right time we will have the right things. So this automotive, as we know it now, it is an input of the last 100 years or even more. And this is an input of hundreds of millions of engineers worldwide. If we look at electromobility, the history, okay, it is quite long, but we can say that the first car was electric before combustion engine car. But more than today's reality, this is the reality of the last 10 or maybe 20 years, and we have no staff available here. So if you ask me how many experts on hydrogen we have in Poland, yes, I think we have a couple. How many high-level electromobility experts we have? A little bit more than those in hydrogen. So to educate them, so who's going to educate all these people we need? So to educate people, we need to have competences. So that's where we have a huge gap. And we need to bridge this gap. And we have been talking to universities of technology nationwide. And so education at the university takes 5 years. You need to get more competences after graduating. So if you look at this roadmap of transition to green transport, and if you look at how long the studies take, so we should have started the studies some time ago to have enough staff on time, as all that is going to, that's not going to be enough. We need now thousands of experts in these industries. And those images from Norway, where we have stacks of electrical vehicles which are not going to be repaired, this is not a joke. Unless something happens here, unless we start educating new staffs, we will have the similar situation in all Europe. So I think we have not been doing our lesson, and this time in the future is so distant that unfortunately we are not thinking about it, and we are educating some more experts in our plant. So my company has been doing quite a lot in this, but definitely it is not systemically arranged in our country, and that's going to be a problem in 5 or 10 years from now, as we are going to miss people for servicing and for operating of vehicles. Yes, so this is a recommendation or a guideline on what should start happening, and that's going to be a green leap forward, but we also need to work on the backgrounds. Yes, very briefly, I absolutely agree. There is no time for repeating things, and the problem I have had, this is a problem of language. We have been using the language of finance experts. So if you ask a question, would you like to save energy? If you would like to save money, so ESG, if you ask what ESG is, so they don't know. But if there is a message like, if you fail to develop a report on this, so you can lose your counterparty in the West, so you can lose your business counterparty. Thank you very much for your voice, Beata Lubos, who is going to finish up our debate. Yes. So let me say that I like systemic approach to things. Probably this is a matter of my genes, but in terms of competences, sooner or later, demand is going to meet supply and the opposites. So I really hope that the systemic tool available at the Polish Agency of Enterprise Development and analyzing on what the condition of competences of Poles are and what are the gaps. So these are going to be the gaps which will get a media boost. And in this panel, we have identified at least 3-4 professions which we are missing. I can also add like the designing, as this is a competency which a majority of people have, should have, if you want to design products. And we can also start talking about generating or creating of graduates from those faculties, but upskilling is a #1 thing, and knowledge is here, and so what is missing, and so what in the cluster you do this job very well, it is this communication tube should be even broader. So we all dream to work in trade which has a big demand. This is clear. And there is some kind of mismatch. We have this diagnosis, and we are missing people generating demands for information where you can find a good job and where you can make a lot of money. And probably this is something what we should discuss in another panel. But I believe that talking about this very broadly, as it was promoted to studying, like what it was promoted among women to study engineering. Let me add on top of that, from my cluster experience, and finishing up our debate, that we have circular economy and the digital transition services, but it turned out that discussion and lacking qualifications and experts, it is a problem in businesses to find leaders who would push different departments in companies, and this is how we developed the Academy of Digital Transition and Circular Economy managers, and we now can offer knowledge to leaders, and they can do some activities in their businesses. So this is happening. And let me just add an anecdote about the studies from one of the professors that the names need to be sexy, as otherwise, despite, no, I think it's not going to be cut. So despite the fact that they are well-paid jobs, they also need to have good names. And this is how I would like to finish up this discussion. Let me say thank you to my speakers, and let me invite you to use the speakers during the break, as they have great knowledge, very extensively.
Proszę Państwa, w tym czasie, jak będą się...
Gentlemen, while the speakers say their good goodbyes, which you can observe before your very eyes. They're saying goodbye, exchanging t-shirts as traditionally after the game. I'd like to announce that we are going to have a 10-minute break for coffee. And we'll meet again in 10 minutes' time for the second panel, this time entitled Digital Transformation. Let's have some coffee, let's have some cookies. Let's be back in 10 minutes' time. So 10 to 12, we're meeting here again.
Fundusze europejskie w latach 2014-2020 to m.in. sukcesy polskich przedsiębiorców, wsparcie dla jednostek samorządu terytorialnego oraz dynamiczny rozwój ośrodków innowacji poprzez wydarzenia, szkolenia, finansowanie, edukację oraz wspieranie współpracy przedsiębiorstw. Lata 2014-2022 to 13 000 umów o dofinansowanie i 15,3 miliarda złotych przyznanego dofinansowania na terenie całej Polski. Nasi beneficjenci są bardzo pomysłowi. Wprowadzają na rynek np. innowacyjne dachowe wymienniki ciepła dofinansowane z programu operacyjnego Polska Wschodnia. Skonstruowali innowacyjny szybowiec wyczynowy dofinansowany z programu operacyjnego Inteligentny Rozwój. Wprowadzają też projekty doradcze takie jak Sukcesja z sukcesem. Dofinansowanie z programu operacyjnego Wiedza, Edukacja, Rozwój. Fundusze Europejskie 2021-2027 to nowa perspektywa finansowa. Jest ona kontynuacją programów z poprzedniej perspektywy i obejmuje fundusze europejskie dla rozwoju społecznego, fundusze europejskie dla Polski Wschodniej i fundusze europejskie dla nowoczesnej gospodarki. Fundusze europejskie. Razem przed siebie.
Historia przemysłu to historia transformacji i napędzających ją wizjonerów. Oto śruba. Kiedyś musiał wykuć ją kowal, każdą z osobna. Setki i tysiące śrub. Nie było dwóch identycznych, więc w tamtym świecie każda maszyna była rękodziełem. Pięknym, ale mało efektywnym. Idea, że śruby można produkować maszynowo, narodziła się w głowie jednego człowieka. Standaryzacja części zamiennych rozpędziła rewolucję przemysłową. Bez standaryzacji nie byłoby przemysłu. Lampa naftowa, żarówka, nawet karabin maszynowy – to wszystko wynalazki pojedynczych geniuszy. W XIX wieku transformację przemysłową napędzali wizjonerzy. Nasi dziadkowie postrzegali przemysł z perspektywy linii montażowej. Praca rąk setek lub tysięcy ludzi, prosta optymalizacja i efekt skali tworzyły przemysłowe imperia. Komputeryzacja oraz automatyzacja zmieniły układ sił i sprawiły, że ludzie zaczęli pracować ramię w ramię z robotami, a wynalazczość przeniosła się do centrów R&D. Równocześnie dane stały się surowcem, takim jakim dotąd była ropa. Dziś niezwykle istotny jest elastyczny model produkcji, który pozwala szybko reagować na potrzeby klientów. Bez modernizacji parku maszynowego oraz infrastruktury ciężko jest utrzymać konkurencyjność na globalnym rynku. Zmienia się sposób myślenia o miejscu i roli pracowników, bo transformacja cyfrowa bardzo zależy od kompetencji oraz talentów ludzi. Wdrożenie rozwiązań przemysłu przyszłości wymaga szerokiego horyzontu i zdolności organizacyjnych. Przedsiębiorca XXI wieku musi wiedzieć, jak efektywnie i bez szkody dla środowiska wykorzystać zasoby, jak szkolić kadry i reagować w ciągle zmieniającym się otoczeniu biznesowym. Skorzystaj z wiedzy oraz doświadczenia ekspertów Platformy Przemysłu Przyszłości. Pomagamy w cyfrowej transformacji do przemysłu 4.0.
Planując ekspansję na nowych rynkach, potrzebujesz ekspertów, którzy pomogą Ci zminimalizować ryzyko. Potrzebujesz profesjonalistów, którzy od lat funkcjonują w lokalnej rzeczywistości i potrafią dotrzeć do właściwych osób. Skontaktuj się z nami. Polska Agencja Inwestycji i Handlu to stale rosnąca sieć biur na 6 kontynentach. Sprawdź, co możesz zyskać, bo sukces zaczyna się od informacji.
Cyfrowa platforma HR 4.0 to nowa usługa klastra SAM umożliwiająca przygotowanie i rozwój kompetencji kadr przyszłości, szczególnie w obszarze HR. Dostęp do bazy wiedzy. Wymianę dobrych praktyk ekspertów HR. Wsparcie pośrednictwa pracy i pozyskiwania talentów do organizacji. Współpracę biznes-edukacja. Skontaktuj się z nami w celu skorzystania z usługi. Film promocyjny dofinansowany ze środków Unii Europejskiej w ramach Europejskiego Funduszu Rozwoju Regionalnego.
MŚP Go Digital to nowa usługa klastra SAM dedykowana małym i średnim firmom produkcyjnym, której celem jest wsparcie w procesach transformacji cyfrowej i wdrażania rozwiązań przemysłu 4.0. Usługa podzielona została na 2 obszary. Część demonstracyjno-szkoleniową realizowaną przy użyciu mobilnego Centrum Demonstracyjnego Przemysłu 4.0 oraz wirtualnej fabryki cyfrowe MŚP oraz część doradczo-konsultingową, w ramach której ekspert przy współpracy z odbiorcą usługi stworzy plan transformacji cyfrowej przedsiębiorstwa. Skontaktuj się z nami w celu skorzystania z usługi. Film promocyjny dofinansowany ze środków Unii Europejskiej w ramach Europejskiego Funduszu Rozwoju Regionalnego.
Lubuskie to region pełen możliwości. Tutaj możesz odpoczywać, uczyć się i rozwijać swoją karierę. Tutaj znajdziesz atrakcje turystyczne, znakomite uczelnie i nowatorskie szpitale. Tutaj spotkasz się z ludźmi, którzy mają wizję i pasję.
Wyobraź sobie, że oglądasz film w otoczeniu największych gwiazd Hollywood, a godzinę później jesteś w samym środku obrazu Van Gogha. Już po chwili popijasz cydr w urokliwym sadzie, planując dalszą podróż. Wieczorem jesteś pod największą tężnią solną w Europie i smakujesz piernika z miasta, w którym żył ten, co wstrzymał słońce i ruszył ziemię. Potrafisz to sobie wyobrazić? Nie musisz. Wszystko to znajdziesz w Kujawsko-Pomorskiem.
ARP i Vehicles to nowa, a jednocześnie mogąca poszczycić się dużymi osiągnięciami marka w grupie kapitałowej ARP. Powołana do życia przez Agencję Rozwoju Przemysłu w 2020 roku kontynuuje projekt produkcji pierwszego polskiego zeroemisyjnego autobusu, wcześniej realizowany przez Rafaco. Inwestycja ARP wpisuje się w światowe trendy rozwoju elektromobilności i bezemisyjnego transportu.
ARP i Vehicles jest to projekt realizowany w ramach rządowej strategii odpowiedzialnego rozwoju. Jest to jeden z dwóch przyjętych kierunków rozwoju elektromobilności w Polsce. My odpowiadamy za ten projekt związany z e-busem, czyli elektrycznymi autobusami, zeroemisyjnymi autobusami. To autobus, który jest przede wszystkim autobusem polskim. Od początku został on zaprojektowany przez wielu polskich inżynierów. Zaprojektowany z myślą o tym, żeby jak najwięcej podzespołów było właśnie produkcji polskiej. Dlatego ponad 60% komponentów właśnie jest produkcji i pochodzenia polskiego. Spółka nie jest spółką mającą tak wielką tradycję jak chociażby polski Autosan, ale jesteśmy spółką bardzo dynamicznie rozwijającą się, która z roku na rok zwiększa swoje przychody. Nie możemy narzekać na brak zamówień. Sukcesy na targach czy w Brukseli, czy podwójny sukces w Kielcach, czy Plovdiv, czy Saloniki, to wszystko spowodowało, że portfel zamówień mamy wypełniony maksymalnie.
We wrześniu 2020 roku Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu sfinalizowała umowę zakupu od Rafaco spółki celowej Rafaco e-Bus. Tym samym przejęła kontrolę nad projektem konstrukcyjno-technologicznym polegającym na opracowaniu, homologacji i rozpoczęciu seryjnej produkcji innowacyjnego autobusu elektrycznego. Dzisiaj projekt ten jest rozwijany z powodzeniem przez spółkę ARP i Vehicles.
Produkowany przez nas autobus to jedno z najbardziej innowacyjnych osiągnięć polskiej inżynierii ostatnich lat. W jego konstrukcji wykorzystaliśmy pionierskie rozwiązanie polegające na umieszczeniu baterii nie na dachu, ale pod podłogą pojazdu. Dzięki temu istotnie obniżono środek ciężkości autobusu, co z kolei wpływa na stabilność toru jazdy, bezpieczeństwo i łatwość prowadzenia. Pomimo baterii pod podłogą, autobus jest całkowicie niskopodłogowy na całej długości oraz w pełni przystosowany do przewozu osób niepełnosprawnych na wózkach. Nasze autobusy są także wyposażone w innowacyjne silniki w nowoczesnej technologii PMSM, które gwarantują niezawodność i doskonałe osiągi, przyspieszenie, moc, sprawność oraz niezawodność autobusu.
Zielony transport to przyszłość komunikacji. Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu aktywnie działa na rzecz rozwoju elektromobilności w Polsce. Wybiegamy myślą do przodu i już teraz dostrzegamy potencjał tego rynku, korzyści biznesowe, znaczenie dla ochrony środowiska i rozwoju innowacyjności polskiej gospodarki. Stąd nasze inwestycje w sektor elektromobilności, a ich wzorcowym przykładem jest powołana przez nas spółka ARP e-Vehicles.
Powstanie spółki ARP e-Vehicles doskonale wpisuje się w potrzeby polskiego transportu publicznego. W ostatnich latach coraz więcej samorządów przechodzi na niskoemisyjny transport publiczny, a od 2025 roku w miastach powyżej 100 000 mieszkańców autobusy spalinowe zostaną zastąpione elektrycznymi. Trend niskoemisyjnej komunikacji publicznej przekłada się na wzrost zamówień realizowanych dla samorządów przez ARP e-Vehicles.
Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu jest naszym 100% właścicielem, dzięki któremu mamy finansowanie na naszą produkcję. Naszymi klientami są głównie miasta, gminy, związki powiatowe, powiaty i spółki komunalne, które realizują transport na terenie miast i gmin. Wszyscy ci klienci wymieniają obecnie tabor spalinowy na nowoczesny, ekologiczny, elektryczny. Oprócz rynku polskiego jesteśmy zainteresowani rynkiem europejskim. W zeszłym roku pokazywaliśmy nasze auto na targach w Grecji, w Salonikach, gdzie spotkał się z bardzo dużym zainteresowaniem z uwagi na jego małe wymiary, które były bardzo dobre i bardzo dobrze się sprawdzały na greckich, wąskich ulicach.
Usprawnieniu produkcji sprzyja niedawna przeprowadzka firmy do bydgoskiego Parku Przemysłowo-Technologicznego, jednego z największych parków tego typu w Polsce. Dzięki temu spółka zyskała przestrzeń do rozbudowy działu produkcji, a także znakomity przyczółek do dalszej ekspansji.
ARP e-Vehicles to nie jest zwykła inwestycja. Jesteśmy dumni, że wspieramy projekt będący w pełni efektem polskiej myśli technologicznej i wytworem polskiego przemysłu. ARP e-Vehicles udowadnia, że polski kapitał i polska innowacyjność mają szansę konkurować jakością nawet na rynkach zagranicznych. Pierwszy polski autobus elektryczny produkowany w nowym bydgoskim zakładzie to także ważny krok w kierunku zrównoważonego rozwoju. Jest przyjazny nie tylko dla środowiska, ale przede wszystkim odpowiada lokalnym potrzebom. W Agencji Rozwoju Przemysłu chcemy, żeby zielony transport był łatwo dostępny nie tylko w wielkich miastach, ale także w Polsce gminnej i powiatowej.
Wałbrzyska Specjalna Strefa Ekonomiczna Investpark to aż 3 województwa, 174 gminy i 29 powiatów. Od początku funkcjonowania siedzibą spółki jest Wałbrzych, drugie największe miasto na Dolnym Śląsku. Dolny Śląsk to jeden z najszybciej rozwijających się regionów w całej Europie. Zróżnicowana kulturowo i bogata przyrodniczo część kraju, której dynamiczny wzrost zapewniają branże automotive, logistyka, IT i nowe technologie. Południe Polski to także systematyczne inwestycje w infrastrukturę drogową i kolejową. Wielkopolskie. Lokacja najstarszych polskich miast. Region bogaty w złoża węgla brunatnego i gazu ziemnego. Ponad 3,5 miliona mieszkańców i prężnie działająca sieć instytucji otoczenia biznesu wspierają branżę spożywczą, chemiczną i budowlaną. Wielkopolską strefę gospodarczą wybrali liderzy rynku, w tym m.in. Volkswagen, Rawak, Dino i Flex Films. Opolskie to zróżnicowany przemysł, wyjątkowa architektura i zabytkowe budownictwo. To region otwarty na innowacje i odnawialne źródła energii. Województwo napędza branża maszynowa i motoryzacyjna. To serce światowych potentatów. Mondelez, Mitsui High-Tech czy Umicore. Polska Strefa Inwestycji, w którą wpisuje się obszar zarządzany przez Wałbrzyską Specjalną Strefę Ekonomiczną, to pomoc publiczna, ulgi w podatku dochodowym i wsparcie dla inwestorów prywatnych. Intensywność pomocy publicznej na terenach zarządzanych przez Wałbrzyską Specjalną Strefę Ekonomiczną sięga od 20 do aż 60% w zależności od lokalizacji inwestycji. Investpark to jednak nie tylko przedsiębiorcy i miejsca pracy, ale także strategiczne przedsięwzięcia własne, w tym lokalne centra biznesu i hale przemysłowo-magazynowe w aż 6 atrakcyjnych lokalizacjach. Współpraca z nami to także kompleksowe doradztwo biznesowe, networking i wsparcie wymiany handlowej, nowoczesne centrum szkoleniowe, wspólna grupa zakupowa i inwestycje we wspólną przyszłość w ramach klastrów edukacyjnego, motoryzacyjnego i lotniczego. W Wałbrzyskiej Specjalnej Strefie Ekonomicznej bije serce najważniejszych światowych inwestycji. Investpark znajduje się na skrzyżowaniu strategicznych szlaków handlowych i komunikacyjnych. To najatrakcyjniejsza lokalizacja biznesowa wybierana zarówno przez polskich przedsiębiorców, jak i globalne marki. Strefa to optymalne położenie geopolityczne i lokalizacja atrakcyjna dla biznesu. To dogodne połączenia drogami ekspresowymi, rozbudowany system linii kolejowych i dostępność do międzynarodowych portów lotniczych. Wałbrzyska Specjalna Strefa Ekonomiczna. Od 25 lat wspólnie rozwijamy gospodarkę Polski i regionu.
Od ponad 30 lat edukujemy i wspieramy przedsięwzięcia ekologiczne na rzecz zielonej transformacji. Jesteśmy pełni zielonej energii i podajemy ją dalej. Naszym klientom dostarczamy nowoczesne rozwiązania finansowe oraz oferujemy doradztwo ekspertów. Zapewniamy narzędzia, by skutecznie mierzyć się z wyzwaniami klimatycznymi poprzez redukcję zużycia zasobów naturalnych czy wzrost zastosowania odnawialnych źródeł energii. Kredytowaliśmy dziesiątki tysięcy inwestycji proekologicznych o wartości powyżej 52 miliardów złotych. Projekty społeczne realizujemy poprzez programy Fundacji BOŚ oraz przy zaangażowaniu naszych pracowników w roli wolontariuszy. Dobra energia wraca, zielona także. Otrzymany w 2021 roku rating ESG plasuje nas w gronie 18% najlepiej ocenianych banków na świecie. Nasz zapał do zielonej transformacji nie maleje. Nieustannie szukamy nowych dróg rozwoju. Inwestujemy w zieloną przyszłość.